Joe, I hear that suit really seals in the flavor.
Well, when you fight crime in a flight suit, um, it
Yeah,
just like you're just basting, and
yeah.
eventually. Mm-hmm.
God, for those of you that are robbed of the video program and are listening to audio
Mm-hmm.
only, Mr. Joseph is decked out in his Ghostbusters flight suit, which is the reason why we're here tonight. We're talking video games again. We're back
Mm-hmm.
on that fantasy football snake, rolling back to the other topics, and we're going to be doing a retro review of
Yeah.
Ghostbusters, the video game, aren't we?
Hmm. Yes, not to be confused with Ghostbusters, the video game that came out on the Wii originally during this time, because this was definitely the Atari release for the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 that eventually gets remastered on the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One, and the Switch.
Yeah, they definitely had a bit
Hmm.
of a journey, this game, because long before even that happened, it had bounced around a bunch of different publishers.
Hmm.
It kind of went through a little bit of like development hell, and this actually goes back to a time where I actually referenced this on the Fallout retrospective that we released a couple weeks ago. That I
Hmm.
had very limited knowledge of gaming news in like the early to mid 2000s. Just I saw a Game Informer with the logo on it, didn't think half of it, and then next thing I know, my brother's like, "Hey, Ghostbusters game came out today,"
Like,
and I
oh,
was like, "What? What?
didn't
What?
know.
Yeah, like
Hmm.
what? What?" Had no idea. Yeah, it was a
Hmm.
good time. It was a good time. I called into work, man.
Honestly, I think I did the same. Like I picked that up and I just hit it like immediately when I got home. And this was at the time where like I have an apartment with friends and I just bogarted the TV that honestly was mine anyway in the main living area. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
guys, I don't know what you got planned for the day, but I'll be playing this for the next two minimum.
Yes.
So this is my time on the TV now.
This is Joe's
Mm-hmm.
special time, not to be confused with Joe's other special time.
Split time. Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's at a much later hour. But more more about the game. Hmm.
Well, so here's one thing I wanted to try to change up for this episode because we've spent a lot of time in the year 2009 with video
Hmm.
games, and we don't want to just keep
In
repeating
the
the
year
same names.
2009.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like we don't just
Hmm.
want to keep going through the same games, and I thought it might make a little more sense to maybe do an icebreaker, Joe, where we talk about
Yeah.
Ghostbusters games
Hmm.
before this one, just for a moment.
Hmm.
I mean, which ones did you play in this storied and not embarrassing history at all?
So I'm not gonna lie, Mark. When we pitched this, when you pitched the idea to me that this is how we're gonna do this episode, and not go the usual route of video games in the year of, um, I did not reveal to you that I'd only really played one other Ghostbusters video game before this one, and it was the worst one. The one that made no fucking sense on the Nintendo, where like you would just kind of randomly drive the Ecto around to other jobs in different spots in New York City. You would do things, but they seemingly wouldn't mean anything. And it kind of followed what the movie did, but it also really didn't. And I just remember not getting very far in the game before I just shut it off. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go outside today.
Yeah.
So, hmm.
Yeah, Ghostbusters didn't really have a whole lot of great things they did on video game consoles because I'm assuming you're talking about the first game the NES released. That I mean, if you do beat the game, all it
Hmm.
says is congratulation, not
Yeah.
congratulations,
Mm.
singular.
Nope.
One congratulation.
When you get one, just one.
Yeah,
Everyone gets one
yeah,
for beating this game when you deserve way more.
yeah.
Um, which I never got the congratulation because I never made it that far.
Oh, I
Hmm.
did, and it's definitely a strange memory. It's not a core memory at all.
Hmm.
The one that I think we actually played the most though was the Ghostbusters 2 adaptation,
Hmm.
which was the single hardest video game I think I have ever played in my life, and
Ooh.
it is not fun. It's not enjoyable by any means. The controls are horrendous. It's this weird dynamic where like you're basically just side scrolling, and then there's these random Ecto 1A sequences that just they test you, Joe. Like if there was like Puss in Boots level anger,
Oof.
it happened here at a much younger age.
I was gonna go
So
Simba and a Stampede and see if that would also dredge up some video game pain and memories for those of us who played The Lion King on the Sega Genesis, and that's
yeah,
usually where we broke a controller.
yeah. These games were just these tie-ins were not great games. Now there was one that came out for the Sega Mega Drive, which was just called Ghostbusters, and it had nothing to do with any of the movies. It was just this original game where you had the three Ghostbusters you could play as. The graphics were actually pretty good for that time frame, like the Genesis era graphics. And the game itself was actually really fun. It was really addictive.
Ooh.
So simple platforming, just basically tiny Ghostbusters with massive heads. It was really funny looking,
Yeah.
but it was
Didn't
a
have
fun game. Yeah,
I say, it didn't have a gorilla at all in it, did it?
there was no gorillas or like magic mirrors that helped them solve crimes. Nothing quite like that. But that's really the landscape, man. There's some extreme Ghostbusters tie-ins that they made that were really god awful. But other than that, I mean,
Not a strong video gaming history for this franchise.
no, absolutely not. It's basically like me trying to stretch now in my 30s, where I slowly realize just how little dexterity I have, and that's frankly the best way to describe the Ghostbusters franchise in video game form up to this point. It's just, yeah, not a whole lot of movement, Joe.
No, really not, which is what made this game so incredibly refreshing because it is the polar opposite of everything we've described before. Because it's going to take like a really familiar controlling system, compare like if you've played other video games in the past, specifically Gears of War. Because well, I don't really know so well because sadly I've not played Gears of War. I do remember playing the game quite a bit, and my roommate being like, "Hi, you run like you do in Gears of War." So
Yeah, yeah.
every time I started sprinting in that game, he made that comment. So it was never lost on me that it was like Gears of War. But on top of like really taking from solid video game mechanics, it does something that we thought we would never get, and that is make an actual sequel to the first two Ghostbusters movies. And that is where this game just really thrived with expanding on the lore of the original movies. So Mark, what do you have to say about how the video game was able to expand the Ghostbusters universe in I would say quite possibly the greatest way ever?
You know, the thing for me was I remember back when we were on early dial-up internet and Ghostbusters 2 had been out of theaters for 4 or 5 years. We're getting to the mid 90s. And people were all talking about these like leaked Ghostbusters 3 treatments at the time. And, you know, some of it was true. Like some of it actually ended up being true over time. But then little by little, it's like, yep, that never happened. It never occurred. And so when this video game comes out, I'm starting to read into it, and you're like, okay, what has this thing got going for it? Oh, they're bringing back literally the entire original voice cast. Awesome. Aykroyd and Harold Ramis are involved in the writing, and they're basically being like treated as consultants in the process and hammering it out. And then, yeah, it's like, okay, this actually seems like it could be legit. And what I was getting at with the original quote-unquote Ghostbusters 3 was that it was supposed to take place in this Manhattan, you know, play on Manhattan. Awful stuff. Don't leave Dan Aykroyd alone. But it was this concept of different universes kind of overlapping, and that's what the ghost world was essentially doing, was overlapping with the real world. And so in the first movie, even the second movie to a little bit, you're starting to see that interference of those worlds. So right away I was like hearing about this stuff and going, somebody was paying attention.
Yep.
Like, holy shit, somebody was paying attention. And and then obviously you start seeing like the iconography and go back to the Sedgwick Hotel and Stay Puffed on the screen.
Hmm.
I would say for sure that like the hype once I realized, oh my god, this game is out, it was real. The hype was
Yeah.
absolutely real for me once I had it in hand.
Absolutely. And you've got something that's also pretty rare in the modern age of video gaming is that it had both a very, very well written and engaging story mode and a pretty well thought out and fun multiplayer mode that came alongside of it, where it wasn't like the whole like, oh, you beat the story, now the game really begins nonsense. And by that, it just means you're doing the same like four raids over and over again. Never gonna forgive you, Destiny, for
I was gonna
making me
say,
pay for DLC that's already on my disc. Yeah, so many infuriating things. No, this game just had a fully developed game with a fully developed online game where you had different play modes, different maps, and this really cool like most wanted ghost system
oh
that
god, yes,
was cool and infuriating in that it's seemingly ass random.
yeah,
You would after you would clear enough money or clear enough missions, you would randomly spawn a most wanted ghost, and like at least to the credit, it would spawn one that you actually needed, and not just keep respawning old ones over and over again. But the goal was to get through this most wanted list of ghosts, and I think you end with like a red Slimer who's massive and huge and just a dick. Um, so it found ways to keep you coming back after you completed the story, and legitimately so, where you actually enjoyed continuously playing the game online, even though sadly that was a pretty short-lived endeavor for
Ugh.
the online world. Hmm.
Well, at least for PlayStation Network, it was very short-lived. I think it was only maybe like a year and a half, 2 years, and
Hmm.
then Xbox Live carried it for quite a long time, though. I mean, it was probably 5 or 6 years or seven. I can't remember how long. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, that multiplayer experience was absolutely unexpected and enjoyable. I remember
Hmm.
that very fondly. I played a lot of that. There was a point where I played it on my brother's Xbox 360 for a while.
Hmm.
Got crazy good at the multiplayer stuff. And then when I bought my own PS3, I started playing online and I jumped into a match and we're doing the whole, speaker headset stuff. And I'm
Hmm.
unranked, completely unranked. I have none of the cool stuff and everything. And like I joined one of the levels where it's just basically like survival mode and you have to,
Yeah.
just
Hmm.
knock out all the ooze creatures and stuff. And the guy's like going, "Is this your first time playing?" And I was just like,
Yeah.
"No, this is not my first time playing. this
Yeah, guys,
this is
don't
not."
mind if you have to carry me a little bit. First timer
Yeah,
over here.
yeah,
Total rookie.
yeah. I was gonna say, do you guys have a good chiropractor? Because I've been carrying so much weight on my back the last hour. But
Hmm.
so, and that's we'll come back to the multiplayer in a minute here. But I think to your point, Joe, about the Gears of War third person perspective, really ended up becoming the perfect vessel for a Ghostbusters game. Because I've seen like this VR experience and some of these games that want you to you know be that close to the action. I don't really
Hmm.
care for that. I thought this was like the coolest way to have you play as a Ghostbuster, where you're standing behind them, and you're still controlling your proton pack like
Hmm.
for like most action games. And I
Oh
thought that
yeah. Hmm.
was fantastic. I mean, what were your first impressions
Yeah.
of that?
I mean, I've always preferred the third person over the first person, over the shoulder view myself. Just because like when you make like a really beautiful game, I like seeing more of it on my screen as opposed to just like this tunnel vision that I really get. I like seeing the character and the proton pack and like in its entirety, and
Yeah,
just watching the proton pack work in this game because it is more than just your standard neutrona blast. You get boson darts and a stasis ray, they integrate the slime pack into the standard proton pack, and you can see it switch between all these modes and different things
yeah,
happening to the pack, and it's something you just miss out on completely if
yeah,
you were just in this first person shooter mode because like yeah you'd see I guess they could make a few things happen to the neutrona wand, but it's just not the same as seeing this full pack go. And I also have to say, like the wonders this game did for the prop building community at the time,
Mm,
because like obviously like we were into this a little bit at the time. Um, not quite fully as like not our peak Ghostbuster gaming, not Ghostbuster like cosplaying that we did,
yeah.
but like watching people building packs that did what the video game did was mind blowing to me. To just actually see it happen like in real life over the internet was just fantastic. So it was something that it gave the franchise and the fans of the franchise this breath of fresh air that we had been waiting for since like what 1987, 1989, 1989.
89 was when 2 came out,
89 was
yeah.
2 came out, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was something we've been wanting for such a long time, and like it did it perfectly, absolutely perfectly. So I don't know, yeah.
Well, going back to the
Hmm.
proton pack for a moment, though, even before you get any of the upgrades for it,
Hmm.
just the fact that the proton pack tells a story, because up on the wand mount
Hmm.
was what you saw was like a little indicator that showed what your health meter was. And I didn't actually notice that when I first started playing it, even though they like bluntly show you and they pan
Hmm.
down it, and Ray is telling you, here's what your
Hmm.
pack is doing. And then after I was playing it at harder difficulties, I went, oh my God, that actually shows my health? What? And
That's
and then
good
the
to know.
concept, well,
Hmm.
then the concept of the cyclotron not just being something that, cycles red lights quickly. It's
Hmm.
like, no, that's how the proton pack actually vents. That's how.
Yep. Hmm.
And then, I mean, that blew my mind too. I was like, they didn't just take
Mm-mm.
something and make a game with it. They took something and actually applied logic to it as like a
Yes.
fan would.
Hmm.
You know, it's crazy. I loved
Hmm.
it.
Yeah, and
Still in
then
love with it.
speaking of things that they like they did for the fans is just the absolutely insane amount of references and Easter eggs to the first two movies, and like the two animated series that came from the franchise. Like right away from the beginning, when you are on the first mission, because Slimer makes it out of this little containment area, and you go down to the basement, which is the little R&D department, and you've got a real Ghostbusters PKE sitting on a bench right next to an Extreme Ghostbusters ghost trap.
Yeah.
So and then of course like the myriad of things from the movies when you got Vigo like his painting like just sitting in the main area and you can talk to him throughout the game.
Yeah.
So they just find ways, and then this was of course like that's like the absolute short list of short lists of references that this game makes, but like it's that throughout the game.
Yeah.
So like Mark, what was something that you remember seeing in this game that just made you kind of like, ah, yes, like this feels good to be playing this game. Hmm.
I mean, literally being in the firehouse, like like the game begins there, and
Hmm.
you got Ray Stantz working on the experimental pack that you're using, and right away you're just kind of feeling like you're part of a new movie, right? Like you're getting to interact
Hmm.
directly with these guys. Um, and for me, it was actually kind of breathtaking to see the containment unit in all its glory, because it's not the same one that was
Hmm.
there in the films. It was
Hmm.
kind of like a hybrid of the RGB version of the
Yeah.
containment unit. So it was made to look more, more realistic,
Hmm.
I guess, and all that. But then you also get to see that there's even like an underground, like dirt floor room
Hmm.
underneath the firehouse too. Like they keep going down.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, that just seems like really uncomfortable to me to have a dirt floor in a basement like that. But hey, whatever.
I mean, I grew up with one, and it wasn't great. Totally creepy, not fun. Um, but like, yeah, being like you said, like it felt like you were part of the movie, and
Yeah.
like you said, part of that was a big part of it is that again, the fact that they got the original four Ghostbusters to come back and voice the game, which is something like we really thought you would never happen because one, Bill Murray, like as
Yeah.
as legendary as he is and how much everyone loves him, like I think, at least in the Ghostbusters community, it's pretty well known that the reason why a third movie really didn't happen is because Bill Murray just was not on board for it. And he would do kind of like dick moves every once in a while, where I remember like there was like some sort of award show, and
Yeah, and you
unprompted, he came out in full Ghostbuster gear. And the crowd went wild, and he's like,
I'm sorry. I don't mean anything by this. It's just all that was left that was clean.
and it's like,
yeah.
oh, okay, he's just doing it to do it. Fantastic. So getting him to come back and do something, you get Annie Potts is back as Janine in this as well, and you've got a few things happen. Obviously, we need a new mayor because the original actor, I believe, who played the mayor, passed away before this game was made. And it was actually I forget the actor's name. He
Oh,
played
Brian Doyle Murray.
yeah, Brian Doyle Murray. He was in the
Yeah.
second movie as the psychiatrist in the psychiatric ward. But
Yep,
he's
yep.
he's the mayor.
Yeah.
And I think the only two that I think people would have loved to have but didn't make it. One, Sigourney Weaver, who I don't know if I can't say for certain why she wasn't there, whether it was like a no interest or conflict of schedule, where she couldn't make it.
Yeah.
And of course, like Rick Moranis, if you know his story after the passing of his wife, he just kind of put all acting to rest, and he was going to focus on his family. So that's understandably so why we don't see Louis Tully in this. However, we do see his suit and his earmuffs to let us
We
know
do.
that we do have the memory of Rick Moranis living on.
Yeah, he has like a little note on his desk that says he's either out to lunch or something. And I also thought it was cool that they brought Mr. Walter Peck, William Atherton himself, back too, and his involvement with this was actually interesting to me because they took his role, and it's like you have to imagine this guy's a government, agent. He's a worker for the people here. So of course he wouldn't get fired after the first. Well, let me take that back. He might have gotten fired from the EPA, but I guarantee you he found another,
Yes.
government agency to work under. And so it was funny to see him return and still kind of be as smarmy with the Ghostbusters,
Yeah.
but he has to work with them this time because he's ordered by the mayor to do so, and they have a government contract. And so right away, like, I like how they avoided the whole, we got to get the band back together thing, and things are bad because it's a sequel. They didn't do
Yep.
any of that. It
Nope.
was like, nope, Ghostbusters are in a great place, but now they've got a little bit of oversight for what they do.
Yes.
So it was, yeah, it was
Yeah,
actually pretty
and
good. I like that.
Very, very good. So on top of expanding that part of the cast and making, again, really showing how like they care about how they want the world to work. So they think of like the politics of the Ghostbusters being able to work in New York City, and basically it has to be done under government regulation. They also managed to expand the actual lore of like the ghosts, and Gozer is a huge part of it. And one thing that I think if Mark and I would make one complaint over Ghostbusters Afterlife, and really it is the only complaint I think that both of us have of the movie, is how it wasted Ivo Shandor. And he basically comes back just to be killed in an instant. Whereas this game, Shandor is the focus of what's going on, and you figure out just like how deep the well of Gozer really goes, and why Shandor kept seeking out this demigod, or no, yeah, demigod is what Gozer was classified as, to basically bring about a new world through destruction. And you get to really dive into the cult of Shandor and all this other stuff that just made the game that much more fun.
And to me, that was one of the most interesting things, because if you're not like a Ghostbusters lore junkie, okay, and you haven't looked into all the background of that, the whole concept of what Ivo Shandor was trying to do in the first movie, even though he was written out essentially as a live action character, but a lot of the threads that they wanted to include about him were fleshed out and they just weren't used. And so in this way, this game functionally is the third movie for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's because, yes, the Cult of Shandor, we actually get to understand who they are. And we also get to understand that Central Park West, that where Sigourney Weaver lives, there was a strategy behind that building, plus several other iconic New York landmarks at the same time. So when this whole construction work that Shandor was doing in that first movie gets mentioned, suddenly it helps you start to get immersed more in what you already know, but you may just not have like an intimate knowledge yet of it. So I thought it was great that they, first off, they got the characters nailed down, even though some of the voice acting can be wooden at times. But the characters themselves, these guys slid right back into them. So like for me, the setting was perfect. What they were trying to do was working. And it felt like an interactive movie right from the get-go.
Yeah, I'm just happy that they thought that Ernie Hudson sounded enough like Winston Zeddemore to cast him in the game and didn't go with Arsenio Hall again. Which, nothing against Arsenio Hall. Arsenio Hall is great, and he was like an absolute great part of the real Ghostbusters. But if you were unaware, Ernie Hudson literally tried out for Winston Zeddemore for the real Ghostbusters and was told he didn't sound enough like Winston and was passed for the job. It's just like, you just, again, more things just feel bad for Ernie Hudson for. It's like, how many more times can you kick this man in the pants? You don't sound enough like the character that you played. We're going to go another direction with it. Oh, okay. Thanks for the opportunity, I guess.
Which this game kind of rewrote some of those wrongs, because like he's not there right away for like the first run that you go on right after the game starts. But he's going to the opera with his wife, and they talk about how he went out and got an education and all this stuff, which I wouldn't say was like a pure table setting for what he was doing in Afterlife.
Yeah.
But it feels like they borrowed that thread from this.
A little bit, yeah. It was like, I think the franchise realized, like, you know what, we've kind of done Winston dirty, like quite a bit in the past. Let's do something to the character that will make, and I think Ernie Hudson will definitely talk about this more. Like he has talked about this quite a bit over how like the character is written as like this like former he's an Air Force veteran, and he has this really like fantastically strong backstory to him, and that's what he was pitched on and got the part for. And then of course, as you know, two people locked themselves in a bomb shelter and reworked the whole script, and Winston is now more of an everyman who's, again, if it comes with a steady paycheck, he'll believe anything you say, and that's who we get with it. So while he was definitely happy to be Winston Zeddemore and is very happy where he's ended up with the character, he definitely has said that there was definitely a kind of a better promise that was made for him. But go ahead.
Well, when he was pitched the role, though, too, the script I think he was working with was also still with Eddie Murphy in mind, right? So that script was naturally much more fleshed out. He was supposed to be at the forefront of a lot more things going on, and then suddenly that script gets changed once he's ready to start shooting, and that really sucks. You feel for the guy. But in this game, though, like they really did pay a lot of attention story-wise to the universe of Ghostbusters, and there's way too much content to go through to try and fit within a retro review, retro review format. But what they absolutely nailed, though, was capturing enough of the vibe of the original movies in the levels that you're going to, but still helping them feel somewhat new. And we're not going to go level for level, but one example would, of course, be going back to the Sedgwick Hotel, which is the site of catching Slimer for the first time. And the whole concept of going there was interesting to me, because really we've only ever seen two or three rooms in the Sedgwick, the long hallway, and not much more. But this game shows right away, though, that even though these levels are designed in a linear format, like a lot of these third-person games are, they still made it fun to do this, because you're getting to see what the rest of a set of a movie is supposed to look like, and so fleshing out the Sedgwick as this, obviously it looks like it should, but then you get to go to other areas of it, Like, I really love that concept and how they made it creepy to even kind of
Yeah.
navigate.
Yeah, especially when you because you do have you go to the Cedric twice in the game, and then when you come back the second time with the Spider Woman, oh my God,
Ugh.
that is solid creep right there.
Ugh. I'm gonna say, man, uh-uh. Mm-mm.
Nope,
Mm-mm.
no, thank you.
Nope. Nope.
And speaking of that solid creep factor, it brings me to another part of the game that I think was done incredibly well when thinking of the original movies, and that's when you get to go to the New York Public Library.
Oh, yeah.
And you get to, one, you do jump between the real world and like the fold of where the ghosts are actually coming from. And you would think that maybe that was the scary part, and it's not. It's actually the children's section in the basement.
Oh.
Because, oh my God, yeah. Hearing like little kids laughing and voices and doors are opening, and like you've got one, you're trying to find like an artifact because your PKE meter is going off for a collectible, and every time you like open a door, kids are laughing at you, lights are turning on and off, and then right when you're happy for the whole thing to be over and you're walking out of the children's section, you hear one of them say goodbye, and it's like, oh God, no, 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 I need to
Yeah.
leave. I need adult. Someone turn on all the lights. Let's get the hell out of here.
That was absolutely a high point there too. And once again, I know it sounds like we're repeating ourselves here, but just the fact that you get to go into the public library, they fleshed out so much more story behind the gray lady, the librarian. So literally the first ghost that they ran into in the movies. And so for me, it was like a combination of things, Joe. Like the story of this game was like irregularly good. I mean, especially for a movie tie-in. But then it wasn't just those details that were really good. It was the fact that there was the details behind the gameplay too. Because the way that you bust ghosts in this is the same concept they talk about in the movies and the cartoons, where there's a like a psychoenergetic field around the ghosts. You got to break down that energy before you can catch them. And that's literally what you're doing in the game. You're firing your weapons and stuff. You see the PKE field and how much energy they have. You wear it down and then you trap them.
Yeah.
And I mean, it makes so much damn sense. It's like, how come nobody else came up with this idea?
I know you got to zap them, you got to cap them, you got to trap them. That's just Ghostbusting 101, baby. That's how it works.
Yeah, it was a beautiful course taught by Aykroyd. But you know what? I'll make one more point before we get to ratings, because I know you and I could absolutely just dote on this thing all day. So what I really loved about it was that they made sense of why things were the way they were in the movies, which is the location of Dana's building, the Museum of Museum of Art, the New York Public Library. All these locations were part of a backup plan, for Ivo Shandor. Like, this guy was just thinking of all kinds of crazy. It was like a Ghostbusters Voldemort over here. He's like coming up with all these redundancies. And I thought that was so like just crazy cool that, yeah, there's no way that he just left it with like one way to bring Gozer into this world, right? And I thought that was like, for one, I was geeking out almost the entire damn time. I mean, these felt like real revelations to me until they came out with Afterlife, and I was just like, the stuff they did with this video game legit should be a movie. I mean, I love those threads that much.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, again, like we talk about how like there's no throwaway line in the original Ghostbusters movie. When you're building the lore of Gozer, like they're talking about real like past civilizations of between like whether it's Sumerian, Babylonian, you've got the Hittites going on in there. And you're talking about like how these civilizations get wiped out, and it's actually because of Gozer as opposed to like an opposing army or anything else going on. And you build this lore very well, and then this game takes it and just really, really hits it home, because even the things that maybe you don't really understand from the first movie, where you talk about how like something is destroyed by a giant Tor. Which Tor, no, there's a giant Tor at first, and then there's the people who know what it was like to, what was it, roast in the bellies of a slore that day, I tell you, I think is what they say. And that was like one of like, what the hell's a slore? I'm not sure what a slore is. So clearly it's just some other monster. And then in the game, you get to see a slore on top of all of the other stuff that they expand on here. And like, there's no like, oh, this is the fourth cataclysm. What were the first three?
To your point though about the slore, what I really want to point out there was like, yeah, you have to fight one, but that's a juvenile slore.
Yeah, that's a little guy, and he's pretty big.
He's a very large dude for a little guy, so that's what makes it kind of the visual when you're starting to think about it. If like you're a super fan, you're like going, man, like what actually was going on with the Voltrini? Like how could they have gotten this, get their ass beat so bad by this thing? And you're like, oh, because it's 10 fucking stories. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense now. So yeah, and the one thing we haven't called out yet, which is this concept of like black slime. And that's really what this game is positioned off of, because this is one revelation that I won't. Oh no, actually we brought this up when we talked about Ghostbusters 101. Fuck it, I'll spoil it.
Yeah.
You actually find out that all the slime that's in New York is there because it was literally pumped into New York, and the Shandor folks found out a way to ship it from one place to another, and that's where all of this energy comes from. That's where all these ghosts are finding ways to seep out of their plane of existence. It's because of this black slime.
Yeah.
And it's once again giving this like crazy level of detailed thought to a concept that was possibly throwaway in Ghostbusters 2.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like even like they don't really seem. There doesn't seem to be like a clear tie between Vigo and the slime. And it's like, I mean, like he talks about like rivers of blood quite a bit himself, but doesn't really talk about slime and how is he doing this? Because maybe they don't really think about that all that much in 2. And then basically you find out in this game that he's just piggybacking off the work of the Shandor cult.
Yeah.
And it's like, like he was a powerful spirit that was attached to the painting, and then because of the rise of this slime being pumped under the museum, the slime just brings Vigo to prominence at the time. So, but again, like I said, we could go on for days about the lore of this game and how it ties into the movie so well. I think it's finally time we start rating this game. And I want to say that, like, based off of how we've been gushing about the game, there's a good chance my gut says, or I have a strong psychic belief that this may be the highest game we've ever rated. But we'll see. We'll see how things go.
Look, I know that we don't really call ourselves journalists, but there is some integrity that comes along with what we do. And I'll be honest. I'm going to be completely honest about this one. So, starting off, Joe, bringing up some graphics, how do you think this game did from that standpoint, coming from the year 2009?
From the year 2009, I thought especially this version of the game, because, like I said, not to be confused with the Wii version, which was a shorter version of this game and had a much more obvious, cute, cartoony feel to it. I don't think it had the original voice cast for the game. It was clearly a different game that was just released at the same time. This one, I felt, did its best to take full advantage over the graphics that were over the next gen systems that were the PS3 and the 360 at the time. So I remember it doing pretty well. I remember some rendering issues here and there, but there was never a thing where someone's face was suddenly just gone. There was nothing at all like that. So, I mean, I would go with a 4 or 5 out of 5 for graphics on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can mirror some of what you say there. Now, there were times where I noticed that certain models were definitely not really all that great. Like, if you look at the Ecto 1, actually it's the 1B, I'm trying to remember what version it is. You get close to that and you start to inspect it, you look, yeah, you can see some of it looks a little janky. They couldn't get all the licensed parts to also put on that car, so it's like, yeah, there's some give and take there. And you can also tell that this was probably a team that was a little bit smaller from a development standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we talked to Jesse Sosa, who was one of the character designers for this a couple of years ago, and he pointed out, yeah, like this was kind of a grassroots movement doing this. So you can appreciate that. I mean, there's some things here and there you're going to find where, you know, maybe there's just unused space in a level that you can kind of peek behind, like in the firehouse, for example. There's just stuff they couldn't put there behind it, but you can still see, and it's just empty space, you know?
Yeah.
So little things like that can impact the graphics for me, but otherwise, though, I mean, yeah, I think for the time period, what it was up against, you just threw out Gears of War as an example. When I look at those games, like Gears of War's like cinematic sequences are usually still looking very similar to the gameplay, whereas Ghostbusters, the video game, had some standalone cinematics that looked pretty good. Like legit, they looked really good. And then when it would shift into in-game cinematics, those still looked pretty good as well. I mean, I thought they were both pretty good. But at the same time, this is the same console that manages Uncharted, and when Uncharted can look as good as it does, I can't give it a perfect score. So I think 4.0 is fair. It's a very clean-looking game, and I can appreciate it for that. Now, when it comes to the gameplay, which is our second metric here, this one's a little hard if we were doing like the remastered version of it, right? Because we have talked about the original release for this, which I feel like is the fair way to kind of talk about it, because this is the original game. The campaign itself, we kind of talked about, it's fairly linear, but if you're a fan of Ghostbusters, you're going to find ways to extend that gameplay. Like there's the collectibles you talked about. There's the PKE scanning and actually getting all of the ghost types in Tobin's Spirit Guide, which has been digitized and it's on your HUD. You can actually upload it. So all of those little things were fantastic for me as a fan. But to your point, the multiplayer side of this, very rare for me to love multiplayer. This is one of the only times where I absolutely loved it. And it was because there were different modes. There were certain levels where you just had to clear X amount of enemies. You know, there's others where you have to get through, you know, wave after wave after wave. And for a game that you could tell did not have the time or the resources to do what AAA studios can, I mean, they definitely turned in like a full-ass product. Like, I did not feel ripped off buying this. So the depth of multiplayer alongside the campaign, I mean, for me, it was fucking excellent, dude. I can't say much more about it being fantastic. The gameplay itself, it's addictive to play as a Ghostbuster. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5, dude.
Yeah. I'm going to say the same thing here. Like, I'm going to mirror it right away and do 5. I guess we didn't really metric the 5s and what they stand for. Usually we put something on it.
Yes, proton packs. Sorry, I thought proton packs would be good. Yeah.
Oh, it's all, yeah, proton packs. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna go 5 proton packs out of 5. For the same reason, because like I'm trying to think of a time where like I got maybe frustrated with the gameplay because maybe like the control didn't feel like it was doing what I wanted it to do, and I feel like that never happened on any difficulty level. Like everything did what it was supposed to. Like when new things happened, like things were challenging, but never to the point where it felt like it was insurmountable or hard for the sake of being hard. Like the one I remember like being the most difficult time in that game was definitely the little stone baby angels.
Yes,
in
the graveyard.
God,
Yeah.
they were a pain in the ass trying to tether those little fucks. But when you did it and you got it, you felt good about it, and not like, thank God it's over. So,
Yeah.
like, it was fun to pick up and play, and like, I feel I do not want to say how many times I've played the story mode because that's definitely a different thing we're scoring here. But yeah, it was fun to play from start to finish. The controls worked well, and I loved the freaking like online just as much as the story mode. So 5 proton packs out of 5.
One last thing I want to add to the gameplay of this was how you could destroy so much stuff in the environment.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And that was one thing that truly kept the immersion high, because yeah, you could burn the doilies on a dinner table. You could rip a wood panel off of the wall. You can shoot at things and they'll explode. You can light stuff on fire with your stream. So those little touches, man. They didn't miss a whole lot of those with this game. I thought that was really impressive.
One of the funnest trophies that is the Ghostbusters drinking game, where you just go around and drink from every drinking fountain in the game, and you get a trophy for it. So it's like, even then like the trophies did like funny little things like that, where like maybe you didn't realize that was a thing. So like when you're playing through the game and you're looking at the trophy list when it's all said and done, like, all right, now I'm gonna go through, play again, get all these trophies, and then you look at it, it's like, huh. That's a funny one.
Yeah.
And I have to be on the lookout for all of the water fountains now. But I believe this is where we look into replayability at this point. Where when you look at, God, like we were talking about, just the overall fun nature of the story mode and how it feels like it plays out like a movie. It's just one of those things where when like there are games that I know both of us go back and replay every once in a while, and this is definitely one of them, because it feels like it's continuing a story with some of your favorite movie friends. So when it feels like you can watch a movie and play the video game at the same time, and then while the online was actually available, like I know you and I kept playing that pretty regularly all the way until they finally pulled the plug. So this is one where I know that because of how much I absolutely love the franchise and love the movies, even with the multiplayer gone, I can go back and replay this game whenever I feel like it, and I get the itch every once in a while. So I'm gonna go replay 5 out of 5 on this one.
Nice, man. I think I will say a lot of the same things here. The only thing I would really add to it was, for me, it's not a game that I go back and play every single year, but I will sit down and replay it. Yeah, every 2 years, I would say. And it is entertaining enough. I find myself doing a lot of the same stuff, just picking up random pieces of furniture and flinging them across the room. Collecting the ghosts in Tobin's Spirit Guide. Trying to get all of the upgrades for the proton pack. I mean, it's and the trap and the PKE meter. Like they really had a great concept with this game that's still fun to interact with. Even in multiple replays here. But the reason why I will dock it just a little bit is because it is about like a 12 to 15 hour game.
Yeah.
It's not like some of these like Ubisoft titles are usually like 35-hour games. Same thing even goes for Borderlands to an extent. So it's hard for me to give it a 5, but I think a 4.0 is fair for it, because I mean there's a lot to love if you do enjoy replaying games. It's just So one thing that I will say about the music of this, the final metric, is that this is an interesting position to be in for this game. And the reason why is because most video games have like entirely original scores. We're not borrowing from a lot of like other things. But Ghostbusters literally reused every like jump scare notification from the movies, every track from the original soundtrack, and even part of Ghostbusters 2 was seamlessly woven into how the music can work in the game. The actual like the title music for this game is the music from like the end of the movie that it reappears throughout the film. So like the music, yes, it hit me because I'm hearing parts of the soundtrack that I wouldn't always hear theatrically, and suddenly it feels like just as much of an extension of the movie in that capacity too. So they've diced it up really well. There are some original score songs that they use when you're fighting bosses and and things of that nature when the action ramps up. So I'm going to give it a 4.0 out of 5 once again, because I wouldn't say it's like emotionally gripping music, but it's almost all familiar, and it's working really well when they chose to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing, man. Like, it just, like, I know, like, we said we can almost say it's a little lazy that there was so much of it is reused, but I think that's kind of what's perfect about it, is that, again, like, it helps add to the feeling that you're playing a movie. Because, like, again, you've got this, like, it's continuing the story that you love. It's got the voices from almost everyone who is in it that you love. And even, like, a quick, like, Alyssa Milano gets to join the cast with there. So she's done very well. And then on top of that, it now sounds like 100% like the movies you loved. So it, in my mind, like, worked great, because I can think of when music was used or when score was used to amplify, like, the suspense of a moment, because it's the same thing that was used in the movies at those times. Even, like, the title, like, track of this game, just coming from, like, that very kind of, like, upbeat, offbeat Ghostbusters sound, when they're fixing up things in the early part of the movie, like. It was great. It was beautiful. And that's why I'm going to go with a 4.5 out of 5 proton packs for it. Because a little bit of more originality would have been the absolute best, but what we got was pretty damn good.
I was going to say, I didn't want to complain too much about it, because it still creates a really fun experience. But yeah, like, you're not going to hear a ton of original stuff in it. But fortunately for Ghostbusters, the video game, the 2009 edition, it actually, Joe, is in an interesting spot within our all-time list. So ended up giving it 36 proton packs out of a possible 40 for a score of 90% on the dot.
Ooh.
And that puts it just about the middle of all scores that we've given.
So not the best. All right.
Yeah, not the best, but it's in the meaty part of the curve.
Okay.
Which is where you want to be, I think. You don't.
Yeah, you should.
You don't. Yeah.
I say I should probably stop getting my information from an alien at the Holiday Inn Paralis.
Well, folks, with that, we do thank you for listening to Digital Dissection. As always, we appreciate everything the Dissection crew does for us week after week. Your support does go an incredibly long way, and if you happen upon this show by accident, why not drop us a review or comment on the show? I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you would like to do more than just tell other people how much you like us, why not actually contact us directly? Because we do really like hearing from you. So feel free to message us on our social media platforms or an email at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com, where you can give us your ideas for future shows or, anything you'd like to talk about. What movie would you like to see a tie-in for, and have it actually be really good? Because I can think of this one and maybe Spider-Man the movie, and that's about it. Very small list. And until next time, keep on dissecting.